For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Sovereign Lord, as we pray for those who occupy high office in this land, may the wisdom of the Wonderful Counselor guide you. May the strength of the Mighty God defend you. May the love of the Everlasting Father enfold you, and the peace of the Prince of Peace be with upon you. And the blessing of God, Almighty Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be upon us all this Advent and Christmas season and forevermore. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
A blessed good morning, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. This chamber is in session. Minutes of meetings. October the 22nd. Tuesday, October the 22nd. To be confirmed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Question is that these minutes be confirmed. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. These minutes stand confirmed. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2024, to be deferred. Honorable member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that these minutes
be deferred.
Of Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2024, be deferred. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. These minutes stand confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Deputy Speaker. Messages from Your Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers. Minister.
Honorable member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the financial statements of the Engineers Registration Board for the fiscal years ended March 31st, 2020, March 31st, 2021, and March 31st, 2022. I'm also commanded to lay the audited financial statements of the Grantley Adams International Airport for the year ended March 31st, 2024.
Government notices.
Notices the order of the day. Honorable member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
Private members' notices. Notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Member.
Beg to move the first reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2024.
The question is that the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2024 be read the first time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The standing orders of the day have been suspended. The leader of government's business.
Government business.
Government's business is the order of the day.
In the name of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport, to move the second reading of the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill 2024.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise this morning to, as the clerk informed the chamber, to move the reading of the Maritime, Underwater and Heritage Bill 2024. And Madam Deputy Speaker, before I go into the depth of the bill and provide the relevant explanations and rationale behind the bill, I want to start, as I will conclude, by thanking the officers within the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport for the remarkable work that they have and they continue to do on behalf of the people of Barbados. This bill is the latest in a series of installments of bills coming through to this honorable chamber, addressing issues relating to maritime and a number of other issues relating to how best we can build out this very important sector, like I said, for the benefit of all Barbados. It is worth noting that on a previous occasion, and we were here, and indeed the last occasion, we went through the merchant shipping suite of legislation, and that has already passed this chamber and the other chamber. And therefore, today is no exception as it relates to the quality of work done by the officers within the ministry. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is important that we go back, as I've said in previous debates, and acknowledge that what led to where we are today. And it had to do with the 2018 International Maritime Organization audit. And in that audit, a number of deficiencies were found. And as a responsible government would do, we are moving with haste to correct those deficiencies and to ensure we build out this sector. And effectively, as it relates to the legislation that we are bringing to this honorable chamber, it speaks to the whole issues of how do you regulate ships consistent with the International Maritime Organization standards as well as their conventions. And therefore today, we are here to discuss the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill. And I must start by making the point that within the International Maritime Organization, there is the overarching framework known as the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas, which effectively, and some people refer to as the Constitution of the Oceans. And I perhaps felt I should start there by giving you an understanding of where we are. Madam Deputy Speaker, the issues contained in the bill that we have to address, and essentially what the bill was designed to do, it was to comprehensively manage coastal state activities specific to maritime and cultural heritage, to ensure a holistic legislative framework underpinned by policy considerations and, of course, best practices embedded in the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, United Nations, UNESCO heritage regimes, as well as best practices. And of course, as I indicated not so long ago, to remedy a number of the deficiencies contained in the International Maritime Audit of 2018. In that audit, and it's worth repeating for honorable members, that there was an absence of maritime policy, structure, and culture within the maritime administration to overall regulate and periodically review the performance in relation to coastal state activities, and that there was also a need for effective regulations of vessels. And of course, this House will remember that we went through the domestic shipping bill, which is now confirmed as an act, and we also did a number of other pieces of subsidiary legislation in order to ensure that we remain compliant. The Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill provides the regulatory framework for the environmentally safe and ecologically sustainable engagement in activities pertaining to maritime culture and natural heritage within the ambits of the flag, port, and coastal state control. This means, therefore, that Barbados registered vessels, both Barbados and foreign registered vessels, calling at our ports or otherwise undertaking maritime heritage activities in our waters, including personnel on board such as vessels, are subject to the requirements of the legislation. Of course, other ocean state responsibilities, including governance of the ocean, regarding capturing synergies between shipping and coastal, maritime, and tourism and ocean-related activities. The bill also seeks to implement the coastal state duties, again, under the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea, and it essentially contains a number of duties. And one, for example, is the duty to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the maritime environment from all sources of pollution, including vessel source pollution. A duty as well to protect the maritime environment from the pollution of vessels, of course, preventing accidents, especially those dealing with emergencies. A duty to protect the maritime environment from pollution from installation and devices used in exploration or exploitation of natural resources of the seabed and the subsoil. Of course, a duty to ensure that all activities under its jurisdiction and control are so conducted as not to cause damage by pollution to other states and their environment. And of course, I think members know this well, because if there are any drilling or accidents occurring, it could spill into another state's territorial waters. And therefore, the bill addresses those issues. In respect of the heritage, maritime heritage, of course, it's subject to the international regulatory regime for cultural and heritage under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, the regime. It also speaks to cultural heritage protection, and also the marine salvage and wreck regime, which is contained in the Salvage and Wreck Convention, to which Barbados is a party. Of course, there's also the General Admiralty Law and Salvage, and of course, this is about the guardians or custodians of the ocean's cultural and natural heritage. And of course, the role of shipping in maritime heritage is not only seaborne, it also supports commerce and trade, but it also supports engagement in other maritime activities, such as cultural and heritage exploration. The Maritime Heritage and Tourism the recently debated merchant shipping legislation therefore explicitly provides for the registration of deep-sea mining work vessels, special purpose vessels that are specifically designed to engage in particular activities. And of course, those were covered in the merchant shipping legislation. The Marine Heritage and Tourism Bill, Underwater Heritage Bill, not only regulates tangible heritage assets at sea by vessels, but it also undertakes the role of the protector of the heritage by ordinary persons. And this is to ensure, of course, that local persons and others who can explore, interact, and benefit from Barbados's marine and cultural heritage. The Maritime Underwater and Heritage Bill also provides an effective framework that enhances the relationship between tourism, natural and cultural resources by strengthening tourism, environment, heritage, people linkages, enhancing the role of shipping in the facilitation of deep-sea heritage activities, and promoting the development of Barbados's maritime heritage economy to its fullest extent. So effectively, Madam Deputy Speaker, heritage tourism, as you will note, is a major driver of the maritime heritage economy, and it includes more specific things related to tourism that I will come to shortly. The legislative framework for the design of the bill, it details a regulatory framework. It talks about what will be achieved through recreation, research, educational activities, experiences, and commercial ventures that connect people. But it's also crafted, more importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the style of the conventions of the International Maritime Organization that provides a holistic and comprehensive regulatory framework for the management, protection, and sustainable utilization of tangible and intangible natural and cultural heritage through detailing the regimes for each kind of heritage and identifying the competent national authorities that will implement the particular heritage regime. Of course, the approach that we are following, especially as it relates to the International Maritime Organization conventions and best practices, is practical because in one instrument, an entire framework is built out, despite varying entities and authorities may be responsible for executing or implementing specific activities within the framework. So effectively, the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill provides a holistic framework for all components of maritime heritage, and that is important for the future development of the country. The same legislative design which was undertaken in the Merchant Shipping Maritime Marriages Act with respect to the designation of the persons or the ministries responsible in the legislative framework within the Merchant Shipping Maritime Marriage Act. That was, even though designated on the auspices of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, but for practical purposes, it was obviously going to be administered by the marriage section of the Ministry of Home Affairs. The legislative design of the bill also serves to improve business and service excellence in Barbados, consolidating into one law the various kinds of maritime heritage and identify that one law that the relevant entities responsible for the regulation of a particular kind of maritime heritage, thereby making it easier for locals, visitors, and other persons with commercial interests. Of course, the bill is also aimed to operate as a one-stop shop for all maritime heritage. It is important that we pursue this path because it is absolutely necessary that we have a one-stop operation to facilitate the advancement of any marine and underwater activities within our territorial waters. The key features of the Maritime Underwater Heritage Bill, it speaks to coastal state regulation of maritime heritage activities. It also speaks to heritage falling under the purview of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, but it has its foundation effectively in the merchant shipping suite of laws. I have already made reference to those laws, the fact that we came here on some previous occasions to address the issue of all of those related laws. The Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill comprises 7 parts and it contains 243 provisions and 4 schedules. Part 1, if I may go through the clauses of the bill. In Part 1, setting out from 1 to 6, it outlines clearly preliminary matters in respect of the bill. Those are found at page 35. Clause 4 in particular outlines the preliminary matters in respect to the executing activities required under this legislation. And the principles are not limited to, but of course ensuring the sustainable use of maritime resources for the benefit of both existing and future generations. It talks about promoting fair and equitable benefit sharing. It talks about encouraging sustainability by development of heritage resources, protecting and recognizing the rights of civil society, local coastal and fishing communities, and local people. It speaks about facilitating effective participation in maritime and underwater heritage management, promoting sustainable utilization of marine resources, enforcing the principle that the polluter pays by ensuring that the persons who cause the pollution, that they obviously have a right to pay. And it also speaks to taking a precautionary approach, ensuring that Barbados' maritime genetic resources and biodiversity within Barbados are protected, irrespective of the status of science on those resources. And I felt it necessary to go through those sections because it speaks to the embodiment of what we continue to focus on and to give force to into law. As I said, the UNESCO Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage 2001 Convention and the 2003 Convention on the Convention for Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. Of course, these are critical matters, and this piece of legislation that we are bringing today, which is almost more than 265 pages, sets out the broad regulatory framework as I indicated. Of course, it is important that we recognize, and if you go to Clause 9, which is important, Clause 9 speaks to the whole issue of sustainable tourism practices, and of course, the bill would require persons to engage in tourism-related activities directed at maritime heritage to promote responsible maritime heritage practices that will minimize marine environmental damage and reduce the carbon footprint. Of course, it will positively connect people and nature through sustainable tourism, and of course, encourage solidarity through tourism by undertaking a number of activities aimed at helping local coastal and maritime communities. Clause 10 of the bill on page 38 sets out the establishment for a maritime heritage tourism development program. And of course, that is for the coordination and facilitation of national maritime heritage activities within the cultural and heritage domains. Of course, that is important, and they're all cited at 10. It talks about the program. It goes at 10, clause 10.2. It details the program, how it shall operate, how it shall be cooperated. And it goes right through to G, all the way down to G, section 5. Clause 11, of course, speaks to the Maritime Heritage Development Plan, and that is critical because the Ministry of Tourism will be responsible not only for the development of the tourism plan, but also for the implementation of the Maritime Heritage and Tourism Development Program. And that's set out at Clause 11 of the bill for ease of reference for members. By protecting and properly managing maritime heritage, we are safeguarding, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, our cultural identity. We want to enhance ocean literacy, and we want to harness the deriving benefits such from tourism activities directed at the maritime heritage. Shipwrecks, maritime sites, and underwater relics give valuable insights into a nation's past, and of course, maritime heritage protection, preservation, and exploration attract tourists, create livelihood and entrepreneurial opportunities for the overall economic benefit of the country. The maritime heritage economy also has the opportunity and potential to enhance the day-to-day living experiences of locals to ensure that we, I apologize, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thought this was on silent. And it also sets out to protect the future of maritime tourism and, of course, introduce a new niche market. Of course, why am I saying all of this? It is necessary because as we continue to build out a tourism industry in Barbados with all of its subsectors, the one important but critical niche that more and more visitors are coming to a destination is to explore heritage tourism. And with this in mind, the maritime heritage economy has great potential, as we have seen, but we can build it out and even develop it further as we continue our expansion. I'm told that, in the words of Caroline Tippett, who's the Vice President of Ocean Markets and Finance for the World Wildlife Fund, it says that nature is the most important business for tourism, as the industry's long and wide supply chain depend on beautiful destinations for their long-term health. Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps you were speaking of Barbados, because we all know very well in this country that we enjoy a significant repeat guest factor, depending on which market you're looking at. Certainly from Canada, UK, and the United States, there's several persons who come back to Barbados time and time again. And they do so because of what we have to offer. But as we obviously continue to drive tourism in the right direction, we are also seeking to build out heritage tourism, which is a significant niche. Of course, there's a lot of heritage in Barbados. We have a number of designated World Heritage Sites, and as we continue to expand and develop our heritage tourism, this will add a new niche. But specifically as it relates to maritime, it would also give us an opportunity for the maritime sector to be built out further and to create those unique visitor experiences. Of course, we are mindful that we have to manage it, and therefore it is important that we manage it in such a way that we do not destroy the ecosystem. And that is why the ministry took the time and went in diligently as they worked to go into a number of bills to bring to this honorable chamber along with the CPC to ensure that we not only protect, but we also enhance Barbados' standing within the maritime sector. Clause 12 of the bill speaks to the duties of the Barbados Maritime Transport Administration. Of course, that administration was established pursuant to Section 7 of the Shipping Domestic Vessel Act 2024, and that clearly sits within the ministry, but within the section responsible for shipping. And under this Maritime Heritage and Underwater Bill, the administration was responsible for regulating vessels and maritime heritage activities and other activities under the legislation, collaborating with relevant ministries, departments, and agencies involved in maritime heritage activities, and of course, ensuring that vessels engaged in maritime heritage activities comply with the applicable national and international maritime laws. Madam Deputy Speaker, when you don't have laws in place, it can become open season for people who believe they can do what they want to do. And of course, the maritime sector is one that we have to manage very carefully. And therefore, this bill tightens those controls and make it very clear to all and sundry who would want to come through Barbados' territorial waters and those just outside of our territorial waters, make them compliant with the law. At the same time, giving the assurance to the International Maritime Organization that Barbados, as a signatory to the convention, complies with the conventions as well as best practices outlined, and that we also follow through and make sure that we conform to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Part 3 of the bill, that's on page 49, speaks to the tangible maritime heritage in the form of lighthouses and historic vessels. Of course, we all know that lighthouses remain a long-standing symbol of maritime safety. Going way back, of course, the international maritime community today still recognizes the value and the benefit of having lighthouses. Of course, there's some lighthouses, when they are no longer operational, become opportunities for us to engage in heritage tourism. They become recognized as significant symbols for a country, and obviously significant symbols in respect to the maritime history and legacy and, of course, heritage in the country. And therefore, by ensuring that this section, the heritage lighthouses, manage it, that we have a section in the bill applying to that section will also, as it sets out at 22 in terms of purposes, it will set out the purposes required to protect and conserve lighthouses. And that, I think, is a significant benefit for us. As I indicated, there are several persons when they visit a country would ensure that they go and visit lighthouses included by other maritime heritage. And therefore, it is recognized that within the bill that we had to pay homage, as it were, to the issue of the heritage lighthouses in Barbados. Clause 22, as I indicated, speaks to all the purpose, speaks to the purposes of the part as it relates to providing for lighthouses and the maintenance of such. Clause 23, designation as heritage lighthouses within the Act. Act 23 empowers the minister responsible for shipping to, in consultation with the relevant agencies and other stakeholders, designate a lighthouse to be a heritage lighthouse where the lighthouse is of historic and continued importance as an aid to navigation and safe voyaging of vessels, and that the lighthouse serves as the traditional representation of hope and guidance to generations to come. I should also note that at page clause 24, the protection and alteration of heritage lighthouses, it makes it very clear that we have to protect those houses. At clause 26, it talks about demolition of a heritage lighthouse. It says a heritage lighthouse or any part of it shall be demolished if there is no reasonable alternative to its preservation, and B, a notice is published at least 90 days before the demolition in one or more newspapers of general circulation in the area in which the lighthouse is situated. And of course, again, this is not only Barbados' law, but this is in keeping with the more generally recommended principles and conventions. Clauses 27 through to 29 addresses the whole issue of the Barbados Historic Vessels Registry Program. It talks about the register and how it works, and it also talks about the restoration of vessels. Of course, this is very important for the jurisdiction. The Barbados program will be managed by the Barbados Maritime and Transport Administration in consultation with the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. So you can see, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is not only a one-stop shop as it relates to the ministry. The ministry obviously will have to have discussions with the museum and to ensure that we classify these programs of heritage within a very defined but dedicated standard. Clauses 30 through to 69 of the bill provides for the maritime cultural heritage in the form of marine-specific traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions associated with the sea maritime heritage and, of course, marine genetics recourse. Of course, in relation to the maritime genetic resources, local coastal and fishing communities hold knowledge associated with such resources upon which they can create inventions. Of course, they're based on the marine genetic resource having practical applications, including the field of medicine and marine biotechnology. Collectively, I must also add that the maritime cultural and natural heritage is not only important to promoting better heritage and management practices, but also strengthening the linkages between tourism, fisheries, and maritime conservation. It should be noted that Clause 10 2C of the bill requires the Tourism Ministry to promote the protection and sustainable utilization of maritime heritage assets in the interests of maritime heritage tourism development in order to advance Barbados' maritime heritage economy. And therefore, the ministry will be collaborating with the ministry responsible for fisheries to ensure that coastal communities, including small ships and operators and other persons involved in the recreational marine community, as well as the fisher folk, that they can obtain maximum benefits from the gains to be derived from this bill. The Part 5, on page 87, clauses 70 right through to 101, the bill incorporates the tangible maritime cultural heritage regime enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Underwater Heritage. It is important that we continue to ensure that all relics, treasures, and objects of prehistoric character, that they remain protected, and that you don't have persons coming into your territorial waters and obviously removing items that they ought not to do. And therefore, the protection is there for all and see for all to see within the law once it is cleared once this bill passes both houses. The other issue relates to the Bill at Clause 69, which it also gives the customs the authority to inspect and verify any marine genetic resource and marine biotechnological products being exported from Barbados as part of the regulating exploration and also the kind of marine natural heritage that we want to preserve. So it gives the customs full authority to ensure that they manage aspects of this bill, and that is contained, like I said, at Clause 69. At Clause 186 of the bill, it also regulates exportation of natural heritage in the form of ocean materials, deep sea natural heritage, as ocean minerals are classified, discovered in Barbados's waters, of course, cannot be exported except in accordance with this legislation. The work that we've done recently on the merchant shipping, wreck discoveries, and sunken military craft regulations, which are connected to salvage and wreck regime in the parent Merchant Shipping Act, provides for the protection of historic shipwrecks in Barbados, and certainly Barbados's waters, from unauthorized salvors and treasure hunters. The protection of recent shipwrecks are classified as culturally or scientifically significant from unauthorized persons, protection and preservation from unauthorized disturbance of all sunken military craft, the proper management of authorized evacuations of shipwreck discoveries, the protection of underwater cultural heritage in the form of shipwrecks. And those are all vested within that piece of legislation that passed through this honorable chamber. In relation to the Part 6, page 104, again, we have to stress the point that the bill implements the mineral regime enshrined under Part 11 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is the common heritage of mankind. And therefore, we have to ensure that our area within the international seabed, as managed by the International Seabed Authority established under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, ensuring that all developments contain with respect to coastal activities are enshrined within the law. I've spoken to the issue of the merchant shipping suite, so I'm not going to delay the House unduly with that aspect. Suffice to say that it is important that we look at the other issues relating to the bill. And Clause 182 of the bill provides and promotes local processing of ocean materials. However, it allows processing of these said materials in another country where there's no appropriate ocean mineral processing facilities available in Barbados, or B, if it is not economically feasible to process ocean minerals in Barbados. So again, we have moved with dispatch to ensure that we protect Barbados's processing of items, whether here or elsewhere, and that we do not lose out on those opportunities. Of course, the bill in summing up Section 6 also speaks to green transport, and we all know that green transport depends on the success of deep sea mining, and this includes the green shipping sector and the transition to energy efficient transport, including maritime transport, necessitate technologies such as batteries, and these batteries rely on minerals from the ocean such as copper, magnesium, and nickel. The greening the transport sectors will lead to an increase in the world's demand for precious metals, given the mineral intensity of green transitioning, and these precious metals are more abundant in deep sea than on land. And therefore, with this bill, it protects Barbados's not only good reputation, but it also ensures that people don't come into our waters, do as they please, and then leave and cause a problem. So that is one fundamental clause built in, or clauses, I should, built into this bill to protect Barbados's future as we move to greening and a green transport mechanism. Of course, a fundamental tenet of the Maritime Underwater Heritage Bill, like I said, is to protect, preserve, and sustainably manage and utilize all of our natural and cultural heritage in various forms, and therefore port state control is absolutely necessary in these matters, and therefore it is critical that we continue to bring the kinds of legislation that we are bringing to this honorable chamber to protect Barbados's marine infrastructure and, of course, our coastlines. The bill at clause 26 on page 204 gives the minister, empowers the minister responsible for tourism to make regulations for the sustainable development of the maritime heritage and tourism sector. That's on page 204. Regulations made by the minister responsible for tourism at 236. And of course, at 237, it sets out that the minister responsible for shipping may make regulations for the following. A, the safety, security, maritime labor safety, marine pollution prevention, and management respect of vessels engaged in maritime heritage activities, and B, generally for the purpose of giving effect to this act. So those are set out very clearly at page 205. On page 206, clause 239, it speaks to the minister being responsible for underwater cultural heritage, which may make regulations, and it sets out the forms, fees, matters relating to underwater cultural heritage, and of course, generally for the purpose of giving effect to the bill. And it also sets out, for clarity, the regulations by the minister responsible for natural resources at clause 240. Now, this bill, as I indicated, empowers the minister responsible for natural resources to make regulations relating to all ocean mineral activities, including ocean within Barbados's waters, and of course, ocean mineral activities beyond Barbados's waters in the area under Barbados's sponsorship. So that's very, very important because this bill obviously brings the coherence in terms of coastal state control activities directed at maritime heritage while simultaneously enabling improvements in business and service excellence in Barbados. And that, for us, is of great concern. The bill, as I indicated, comprises of 4 schedules, and those are so noted within the bill, and it also includes all those matters relating to the United Nations Convention Law, the Seal, like I said, for which Barbados is a party. The Maritime Underwater and Heritage Bill, once enacted, will bring significant benefits to Barbados, including connecting tourism to maritime cultural and heritage. It will also enhance the services of the Barbados Ship Registry through providing for the establishment of a national historic ships registry. This is something that other countries do, and therefore it is important that we follow through on our heritage, but at the same time, encourage others who want to do business with Barbados to do so. This bill will also continue to place Barbados at the forefront of actions that support United Nations Decade on the Ocean of Science for Sustainability, that of course from 2021 to 2030, and this initiative will support countries' efforts to reverse the cycle of decline in the ocean health due to climate change, and will also help to galvanize ocean stakeholders behind a common framework that will lead to improved conditions for sustainable development of the ocean. Of course, it will also enable the commercialization of marine-specific traditional knowledge, which is oftentimes undervalued, but it will also offer new, non-traditional economic opportunities for Barbados' economy. The bill also is testament to the fact that we recognize the importance of the Admiralty and the maritime law to not only conventional shipping and trade activities, but also to ocean-based activities supported by shipping, how shipping industry is intimately connected with maritime heritage, how the tourism industry can enhance its maritime heritage platform, and of course, advance other but more diverse forms of economic activity for the country. And it basically sets out how the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport can support and facilitate development and in other sectors directly or indirectly. The bill, once enacted, will join the family of legislation created to correct the legislative-related deficiencies identified in the International Maritime Organization's audit. In this instance, from the viewpoint of putting adequate legislation in place for the collaborative regulation of coastal state control activities. Of course, I must, for the record, again, remind the Honourable Chamber that Barbados, and I would have come to this Honourable Chamber and piloted the facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act that was enacted on February 12th of this year, and that was obviously an act set out to simplify the documentary processes relating to ships, to expedite clearances of vessels, passengers, and the overall efficiency of ships at ship-port interface. The Domestic Vessels Act, which was enacted on July the 26th of this year, again, that was to regulate in accordance with the minimum standards set up by the IMO for small vessels of 150 gross tons and below. We also had the Maritime Transport Emissions Control Act, which was enacted on August the 29th of this year to prevent, reduce, and control atmospheric pollution by ships. And of course, just less than 2 months ago, 6 weeks or so ago, we had in this very house, in fact, the Merchant Shipping Suite of laws, that set of laws would have been passed, I believe, is October the 29th, and we also had it passed in the Senate chamber. I believe it was November the 8th. And again, the Heritage Bill will provide the legal infrastructure for activities at intersections of shipping within the maritime heritage tourism sector. We are obviously going to continue to work on building out this capacity, and it will also enable Barbados to effectively capture and sustainably utilize the cultural and natural wealth embodied in the tangible and in the non-tangible ocean-based heritage. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to emphasize that we are not wholly dependent, but largely dependent on tourism. And therefore, if we continue to be dependent, we will have from time to time to have attractions. And from time to time, we will have to look for new sources of income, not only from tourism, but from the maritime sector. And clearly, the maritime sector is one that once we can get all of our legislative framework in place, it will certainly continue to build out opportunities, indeed financial opportunities. And you recall when the last occasion when I spoke in this chamber, I spoke about, for example, if you want to get into shipbuilding, I spoke about finance relating to maritime finance. There also is the Barbados Registry. Again, once we have all of the necessary legislation in place, Barbados can become a very attractive place for ships to register, and therefore that comes with enhanced revenue. At the same time, it would also allow those ships who hitherto have not come to Barbados or have not registered, with the Barbados Registry to do so, recognizing that we fully support and bringing on board all of the IMO-related conventions and best practices, and that we should continue to do. I might add that in the new year, we will have the marine areas, bill brought to this chamber, along with some other legislative matters that we intend to continue our quest to build out the maritime division within not only the ministry, but certainly in Barbados. And that is a plus for us. So it is all interwoven, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the sense that we can also, whilst we build out tourism activities, generate increased earnings for tourism, we also have opportunities to drive additional economic benefits deriving from the changes that we're making and the laws that we're introducing for the maritime sector. I don't believe that I have to go much further. Of course, it is always a technical piece of legislation. I am grateful for the officers who continue to guide me, because, you know, I said so before in this honorable chamber, I'm no expert in these matters, but that the ministry is sufficiently, the ministry is sufficiently capable, and it has the human resource component there to guide us and, of course, prepare us as we go through. And therefore, there's an officer who continues to make a significant impact and impression, not only in the ministry, but on behalf of the entire Barbados. The officer assigned as the Director of Maritime Affairs, who continues to deliver on her objectives within the ministry. And I'm grateful for her and her entire department's input, because as junior officers, senior officers, and other officers who have been trained in these areas that will show the best that Barbados has to offer. And we are fortunate that we have the level of skill and the level of expertise within the ministry. I should also like to recognize the Acting Chief Technical Officer within the ministry, who continues to work very closely to align herself with the objectives and the department's objectives with the goals of the ministry in respect of these areas. And of course, when you have capable persons within your department, it is important as not only as a member of Parliament for St. Michael West Central, but as a minister responsible for the department, to obviously thank those who have been a party to and have given great service for the promotion. Of course, the Permanent Secretary who's here with us, I must also thank the Permanent Secretary for guiding, obviously, and ensuring and coordinating that we get all these matters to Parliament. They might tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I'm a hard taskmaster, but as a statement of fact. But I do so in the name of Barbados to ensure that we achieve the goals that we set out, and that Barbados continues to build out the maritime sector. And now that we're twinning with respect to the Maritime and Underwater Heritage Bill, that we have an opportunity to twin both, but at the same time drive the economic activity and benefits, while at the same time ensure that we are aligned with all the IMO-related conventions, and that we are aligned to ensure that we structure Barbados's maritime sector in a way that will allow persons to continue to do business with us. I also want to thank the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel within the Attorney General's office. I must tell you, when I look at the voluminous nature of bills coming to this House in respect of the Maritime Division, I must tell you that it takes a very special and fine brain to process and draft all these related issues, albeit that some are related to conventions that we have, but then to interlock them and put them into one piece of legislation, I really have to salute the officers within CPC for all of their hard work. It's never an easy task when you have to pull together. Drafting is a specialist area. I don't know much about it. Suffice to say that in my very youthful journey as a minister, I have to come to appreciate all the hard work that they do within that department. And therefore, I want to thank all of the officers. This bill alone, I think it contains 268 pages, actually. And on the last occasion in October, when we were here dealing with the shipping legislation, that bill was in excess of 1,000 pages. And not only, not in bold print, I may add, but in fine print. And therefore, it tells you the voluminous nature of the work that they have to undertake within CPC. So I have to express on the floor our thanks to all of the officers involved in this respect. Of course, as I mentioned, we have some other legislative matters to address. We will be bringing those in the new year, including Marines Areas Bill, and there's some other bills that we have to bring here in respect of maritime. But I give the House the assurance that we will continue to work diligently on behalf of the country to ensure that we have legislation that is fit for purpose, legislation that would allow us to continue to advance within the maritime space, the initiatives and the activities. I'm following through on all of these activities, and I'm sure that you will hear more about it later when we come to the estimates debate, the clear path and why is it that we're continuing on this path of developing the maritime sector. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think there's much more that I can add. I believe I would be speaking close to an hour, and therefore I believe that the bill in all of its objects and reasons set out what we're about, and I would like to move at this stage the second reading of the bill. I'm obliged to you, Madam Deputy Chair.
Honourable Member for Christ yourself and Leader of the Opposition.
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I did pause, I was waiting for the Honourable Member for Christchurch West to take his seat. I wasn't sure whether he was leaving or if he was staying. And happily he's staying to join his colleagues who were present, all 5 of them.